The opening scene begins with the main character named Kyle, a Buxton Academy High School student. Kyle completes his morning routine and heads to school, where he delivers a brief speech in front of an audience about vanity and wealth. He, being a good-looking and rich guy, bullies the unattractive students. The majority of the audience cheers for him, comedy president, and he solicits votes by claiming to be wealthy, attractive, and the son of a popular news anchor. Meanwhile, a girl with a tattoo on her face named Kendra is also in the crowd, but she soon leaves, appearing enraged by his speech. It is revealed that Kendra is a witch, which Kyle is completely unaware of. After the speech, Kyle walks out, only to discover his disfigured and graffitied posters. Without any hesitation, Kendra admits she did it and walks away. Following this, Kyle encounters Lindy, a classmate whom he believes was involved with Kendra. However, Lindy clears that she doesn't know Kendra and has nothing to do with what just happened. She also expresses that she doesn't want anybody to speak for her, and the two part ways after shaking hands. It seems that Lindy has a crush on Kyle, but this is the first time he's spoken to her in 3 years. Later that night, Kyle returns home and has a generic conversation with his father, David. Their conversation indicates that the two do not have a close relationship, and that David is a busy person. Kyle texts his father, despite the fact that they're in the same room, to inform him of the election results. However, David is so preoccupied that he barely pays attention to his son and walks away. A few moments later, their housemaid Zolo comes to Kyle for a conversation, but he treats her disrespectfully. Despite this, Zolo doesn't take his words seriously and walks away with a smile on her face. The next day, Kyle wins the election, becoming president, and everyone applauds for him. Later, he approaches Kendra, who isn't happy by his victory, so he offers her a VIP party ticket. Kendra decides to give him a chance and accepts his invitation to the party. Later in the evening, Kyle gets ready for the party and leaves with a white rose. There, he notices Lindy, who is working as a waitress. The two have a brief conversation when Kyle learns that Lindy is saving money for the Machu Picchu trip. She informs him that she'll go home after her shift without attending the main event. They also take pictures for the school newspaper while discussing the white rose and its meaning. After a while, Kendra shows up at the party to meet Kyle, but he humiliates her in front of everyone. Kyle's bullying her in front of the crowd appears to have been a ruse. This makes Kendra furious, and as a witch, she casts a curse on him, prompting him to feel uneasy. He also starts feeling dizzy, and as a result, he returns home, leaving in the middle of the party. Upon arriving home, he discovers Kendra on his balcony, who explains her curse in detail. She transforms him into a bald, ugly person and gives him a year to find someone who loves him. She also informs him that the spell will only be released when someone confesses their love for him. Following this, Kyle is horrified to see his disfigured face and the ugly marks all over his body. Later that night, Kyle's father David returns home, only to discover his son's terrible appearance. He immediately takes him to the doctor and requests treatment. He also claims that his son would rather die than look like that. However, the doctor has no solution for this. David tells the doctor that he's willing to risk everything, and upon hearing this, Kyle storms out, believing that his father's willing to risk his life as well. A few days later, David relocates Kyle to a new location far from the city so that he can live alone. Meanwhile, the entire school is informed that Kyle is in a rehabilitation facility. Zolo is also there to look after Kyle. For the first few days, he wanders aimlessly in the empty house, appearing to be bored. One day, Kyle receives a visit from a private tutor named Will, hired by his father. However, he doesn't want his services, so he asks him to leave. But when Kyle learns that Will is blind, he lets him in and then starts complaining more about his father. The same night, Kyle is staring at his father's picture and sulking in depression when Zolo walks in. For the first time, Kyle talks to her in a pleasant manner, inquiring about her family. Zolo tells him about her 3 children in Jamaica and expresses her sadness for not being able to see them. She also advises him to be patient, assuring him that David will pay him a visit. However, Kyle doesn't think so, and as a result, he leaves a voice message to his father, telling him not to pretend to be visiting him. Following this, he rides his new motorcycle into town and arrives at a party, possibly organized by a friend. Upon entering, he comes across Kendra and apologizes to her, pleading with her to make him normal. But she ignores him and walks away. A short while later, he notices his best friend kissing his girlfriend, which breaks his heart. Just then, Lindy approaches him and talks to him regarding romance. She, unaware that it's Kyle, shares her grief with him, and Kyle also seems to relate with her. The next morning, he wakes up on the floor to find his blind tutor playing darts. The two of them have a brief conversation when Kyle expresses his disappointment after learning that his friends are all fake. Later, he recalls his good old days, staring at a photograph of himself with Lindy. At night, he walks out and heads outside Lindy's house, from where he secretly looks at her through her window. From that day onwards, he starts stalking Lindy, and it appears that he is attracted to her. One day, while dining, Kyle thinks of helping his blind tutor regain his sight, but the latter believes that it's impossible. During the conversation, Kyle reveals that he went out with a girl the night before. Hearing this, Zolo as well as Will become happy for him and play golf on the roof to celebrate the good news. Following this, Kyle again goes to see Lindy, but this time he notices two thugs holding Lindy's father at gunpoint. Wasting no time, he attacks one of them, throwing away his gun and saving her father. But the other thug pushes Lindy down the stairs, knocking her unconscious. After this, Kyle carries Lindy to her place. Soon after, he hears a gunshot, and upon returning back to the scene, he discovers Lindy's father has shot a thug. The other thug flees after threatening him with vengeance. Seeing this as an opportunity, Kyle blackmails her father into getting Lindy to stay with him in order to protect her. In the next scene, Lindy arrives at Kyle's house, clearly upset with her father for abandoning her in a stranger's home. Kyle conceals his true identity and impersonates himself as Hunter. Following this, he tries to impress Lindy by dropping expensive gifts outside her room, but all of his efforts are futile. When Zolo notices this, she tells him that Lindy is not the type of girl who can be bought and advises him to know her personally. As a result, Kyle goes to Lindy wearing a ski mask and offers her the same sweets she likes. Kyle knows her favorite sweets because he's seen her eating them while stalking her. Lindy inquires about why she's brought here and asserts that she can take care of herself. However, Kyle comforts her, mentioning that her father only did this to protect her because he loves her so much. This finally calms Lindy, and she appreciates his gift. Following this, Kyle starts falling for her more and begins writing letters to her. He also decides to build a greenhouse, knowing that Lindy likes roses. From the next day, Kyle starts building a greenhouse, and during this entire time, he hides his face from her. One evening, he's sitting in the living room when he notices his marks on his right arm light up with colors. Shortly after, Lindy walks into the room and begins conversing with Kyle. The two bond over translating Korean television shows. After a while, Kyle reveals his face and asks if it's terrible, to which she responds that she has seen worse. This makes Kyle overjoyed, and he begins liking her even more. A few days later, Kyle finally completes the greenhouse and invites Lindy there, impressing her. Then the two have their first tutor class in between the beautiful flowers. Before studying, Kyle provides her with the same coffee she admires. The class never happens because Will and Zolo leave them alone, and now the two begin reading poems together as the seasons change inside the greenhouse. In the next scene, Kyle goes to Kendra and begs for more time to break the spell, but she refuses. Regardless, she agrees to assist Will in regaining his sight, and Zolo agrees to see her children again only if he succeeds. Afterwards, Kyle goes to Lindy's room and discovers that she has a picture of him together, which surprises him. They then talk about Kyle, as she is obviously unaware that the person she's speaking with is actually her crush. Lindy expresses that she senses something special in Kyle, and that she likes that. Afterwards, he invites her on a late-night walk to the zoo. They whisper a little and run around the place, bonding even more. Then, Kyle takes her to a place and tells her about his past, mentioning how he visited the zoo with his father. He also shares how his mother abruptly left without warning. After spending the night together, the two sit on the roof and wait for sunrise. Lindy places her head on his lap and falls asleep, claiming that she feels like she has known him for years. Kyle then carries her to her room and tucks her into bed. Just then, he sees the notification on her computer and learns that she's still planning to run away to Machu Picchu with some other guy. In order to persuade her to stay, Kyle takes her to his father's luxurious mansion. On their way, Lindy receives a text from her father asking her to return because the thug has been apprehended. Upon reaching there, they spend some private time together, and while conversing, Lindy shares more about her past. In the evening, the two are walking alongside the lake and about to kiss when her phone rings. After answering the call, Lindy learns that her father is hospitalized, and as a result, she quickly boards a train to the hospital. Before departing, Lindy tells Kyle that he is a good friend. This obviously hurts Kyle, as he wanted to be more than just friends. Meanwhile, on her way to the hospital, Lindy reads all of the letters Kyle gave her before they kissed. In the letter, he appears to have mentioned how he's gradually falling for her. After a few days, Lindy's father gets well and she attempts to contact Kyle. However, he is still hurt by her words and doesn't answer any of her calls. Soon, the day arrives when Lindy is departing for the Machu Picchu trip. At home, Zolo, as well as Will, suggest that Kyle go meet her before she leaves. Obliging to the suggestion, Kyle goes to school and approaches Lindy. Everyone there is staring at him because of his creepy appearance, but he doesn't seem to care at all. When Lindy sees him, she asks for the reason why he didn't call her back, to which Kyle responds that he was afraid she wouldn't love him. He then finally confesses his feelings for her in front of others. Following this, she lowers his hoodie, kisses him, and hugs him. But she doesn't say "I love you" yet, due to which the spell remains. Despite this, he doesn't force her, and instead tells her to enjoy her trip. Lindy walks away, but soon after, she turns back and finally admits that she loves him. Kyle then walks out and notices his reflection, only to discover that he's reverted back to his normal self. A few moments later, Lindy runs back in search of Hunter, but instead finds Kyle. She tries to call Hunter, but gets surprised to hear Kyle's phone ring. This is when she finally realizes that Kyle and Hunter are the same person. It takes her a few moments to digest the situation, but she eventually does, and the two kiss. In the final scene, Will has regained his sight, while Zola has received her documents, which will allow her to visit her children in Jamaica.